Hello and welcome to B Shifter. I'm John Vance. Today, Josh Blum, Doug Wehmeyer, and myself will be talking about division operations and our division operations workshop that we're holding in November at the Alan V. Brunacini Command Training Center. It's the only one for the next 6 months at least that we're going to be doing in Phoenix. We'll talk about the workshop, but more importantly, we're going to talk about the role of the division boss. So we are glad you are here for the conversation today on B Shifter. Here we are with Josh and Doug talking about division operations. And division operations is an important part of reinforcing command and having command not only manage an incident of complexity, but also knocking down the span of control so it's manageable for an IC. In what situations do you guys think we should be seeing division operations put in place to make the incident better?
Well, I think it absolutely needs to happen once we've decided or once we've assigned, 3 or more companies to a specific area. So, if we're running an apartment complex fire and we've got the third floor well involved and we've got crews in multiple locations on the third floor, multiple crews there, putting a division boss in place at that instance gives us the ability, like you said, manage the span of control. It puts somebody in there that's not at the task level, who's able to ensure that we're taking care of what needs to get done, who's making sure that we're monitoring the air consumption of the crews that's inside, managing the accountability of those crews, recycling them and returning them, making sure that we have the resources needed in that case for Division 3 to take care of the tactical objectives that are needed for the fire and ensure the tasks are done. And then likewise, it allows that company officer then to worry about their crew, right? They arrived on the engine. They arrived on the ladder with 3 people going to work with them. And then they get back to their area of influence, which is that crew and doing what they do every day, that they could take care of the tasks they're assigned, and they're able to ensure that they have the accountability for their crew and performing the functions that they were given, versus looking over a much bigger area and then taking their attention away from the job that they do every day.
We hear sometimes span of control is 7. What's the ideal span of control when you have a division boss?
The span of control varies depending on, one, who's the incident commander, who's that tactical boss, who's the company officers, and what's the capability of the company. What are our critical factors? What risk is associated? So, there's incidents where, you can manage 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with no problem. And then there's incidents where you probably, if you get to 3 operating in the IDLH, you probably want somebody there as that support officer to be the embedded safety to help you to organize, manage, and orchestrate what's going on in that sector division. So I don't think there's a magic number. Some of that span of control stuff clearly comes from what can you manage in a non-IDLH like type environment in an office. What can you manage in the EOC? What can you manage in the firehouse? When there's non-IDLH, and it's slowed down a little bit, and there's not going to be this environment that we're working in where we're dealing with a 12, 13, 14, 15-minute work cycle, and we're constantly going to be rotating crews out, and the critical factors are continually changing, either getting better or worse.
Let's talk about command safety for a little bit. Command safety is a concept that came out of the Tarver incident. It's where and there's a lot to it, but one of the elements is embedding safety along with that division boss when it's possible, when we have the resources to do it. When you team up an officer who's a division boss with a safety officer that's embedded within a division, and by that we mean that person isn't roaming the scene. They are staying put with that division boss. What does that look like, and what's that responsibility breakdown between the division boss and their partner who's working with them?
One thing I want to clarify before I answer that question totally is sometimes Blue Card gets a bad name from some people about safety officers. You guys don't use safety officers. You don't have safety officers. And indeed, that's not the case. We have safety system on steroids, really. It's not one person. It's not one person on the fire ground that's going wherever they want. It's oftentimes one person that we embed where the most work's happening, where the biggest risk is associated, to help manage that safety. And if we had 2 tactical bosses in place, then both of them are responsible for safety in that geographic area. And if we're getting to that point, then we're probably going to have support officer or somebody that's responsible maybe in the strategic command position that may be on a separate channel, just talking to those people to help organize, what's going on with safety. How are we rotating these companies? What's the bigger picture when it just comes to the whole safety piece? How many resources are we really going to need? So because we don't have a person that walks around with a vest on that says safety on it, and they run around and tell people don't run with scissors and put your gloves on, doesn't mean we don't have safety. We have safety when it comes to the whole IDLH environment, and we embed those people in those divisions, and we push division bosses forward, as Doug had said. When you have 3 or more companies working in a geographic area, that's going to be an incident that's escalating.
And I would say 9 times out of 10 in my IC career, if we made somebody a safety officer, they ended up becoming tactical at some point. They would get to the Charlie side and call for a line and then find themselves a division boss role. I'm just going to take Charlie. Well, now you don't have a safety officer. Plus you had somebody roaming around, and easily somebody on the Alpha or Bravo division, if you're standing in Charlie, could get right by you doing something or making entry or getting beyond what they should be doing as far as air management goes. So having that role embedded into a division really exponentially increases our safety effectiveness, but it also, once again, allows us to be more aggressive because we're managing it right there where the problem is instead of trying to catch up on the back end.
I think that's the key of it. You're putting the safety officer embedded with the tactical level officer where the work's being done. What value is there other than getting the constant 360 report from someone doing hot laps around the building? I don't need somebody on the Bravo side when we're operating on Alpha. And, you came here, you took a snapshot for a second when you're at Alpha. Now you're on Bravo. Now you're on Charlie. Now you're on Delta. Now you're back to Alpha. Well, what happened on Alpha while you were gone? And I think it's a much better operation for us when we embed that person with us that gives that tactical boss a second set of eyes. It gives that tactical boss the ability to ensure that somebody else is also monitoring air consumption. We know how huge air consumption is. We're seeing new standards and new requirements coming out of NFPA with that. That's going to direct how much time we're letting our crews work inside the building. And when we're on a 10, 15-minute work cycle, ensuring that someone's there taking care of that, working with that tactical boss to rotate those crews through. It hardens command at that location, and it makes the entire operation safer.
So ideally, what does a division boss look like, sound like? Where do they come from? What rank is it? What does it matter? How do we groom that person? Where do we get our division bosses from?
A division boss really can be anybody that we've trained to do the job. But when we want to talk about ideal, we'll talk about the ideal thing first. We can make a division boss anybody who really that we would use as a strategic IC as long as they've been trained to do that job. And in most places, that's the missing component. There's really no tactical SOPs. And when we say tactical SOPs, we're not talking about what are your tactics on the fire ground and how you attack a basement fire or a balloon frame house or whatever. We're talking about tactical level SOPs when it comes to what's the job description for somebody when they're being pushed forward to be a tactical boss at a house, at a apartment building, at a high rise, at a big box, at a strip mall, at a hazmat incident, whatever it is. What is the real expectation? What are their job duties? What do they do? And then that just lines back up with letting the task level do their job. So, to kind of answer the question about who can do it? Well, really anybody can do it that you've trained to do that job. It's not rank based, but what it is tactical level bosses operate in the warm zone. They do not operate in the IDLH. They're a little bit closer to the incident than the strategic IC, but they're far enough away from the IDLH that they can kind of see a little bit of the bigger picture. And then on the flip side of it, they're close enough that they can kind of get that feel or taste of what's going on at the incident. Because they're truly just another set of eyes and ears for that strategic IC as they're building out that organization so that we can maintain span of control, keep a safe fire ground. And then ultimately, it lets us be more aggressive on the fire ground because we feel more comfortable because the event is not managing us. We are managing the event.
I think part of it, too, is who's it not, right? So where it could be anyone who's trained for it, we really don't want it to be the captain of ladder one, right? The captain of ladder one came to work today to be the captain of ladder one. They know the functions, the skills, the abilities of their crew. They know the attitude of the crew that day. They know what's going on at home with those guys. They know how they're feeling. They know if they're sick. They know how they perform. They know their air consumption rate. And that captain of ladder one is the captain of ladder one. We put a company officer with that crew to ensure crew integrity, to ensure that someone with the skills, knowledge, and ability to manage them is managing them. And when we pull someone off of a company to make them a tactical boss, it really puts them at a disadvantage, because now who leads that crew? And it's easy to say, okay, well, then just the next guy. When we look at so many of our organizations today, that next guy could be very junior in experience, maybe his or her first fire. We don't want to do that. We want to keep up the company officer with the crew, perform at the task level, doing what they need to do. Maybe in your organization, it's a staff chief that's responding. Maybe it's, battalion 2. Maybe it's a battalion from the neighboring jurisdiction, right? The key of it is the person's trained. Preferably they can fill in immediately as the IC. They're skilled to that level. They're trained to that level. We're putting someone in that's improving, it's strengthening, and it's allowing the IC to reduce their span of control and control that workload, and ultimately control radio traffic, right? We're reducing the number of people that are calling the incident commander on the radio. That's now allowing us, as Josh said, the guys working in the warm zone, face-to-face communication with the captain or lieutenant of, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is what we got. It improves the entire operation and makes it safer, but it has to be the right person.
We often say with Blue Card, we are setting everything up for the next transmission to be Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. How does having a division boss in place prior to that Mayday help improve our organization?
So in our system, the strategic IC, when somebody says Mayday, Mayday on the radio, the strategic IC's really one of their biggest jobs is to be an active listener of what's going on the fire ground. When a company says something on the radio, if they're calling command should not be saying unit with traffic, go ahead, re-identify, none of that. They're an active listener. So the strategic IC is answering that initial Mayday and then starting that help order process. So trying to talk to the company so that they can work through and try to help them resolve the problem. That just fits right into the whole Project Mayday, Don Abbott study, all the way back to Brett Tarver dying when they realized that the outside-in rescue does not work, that we solve the problem from the inside out. So the strategic IC is communicating with those companies inside, starting that help order process, thinking about the bigger picture, while the tactical boss in place that's managing that geographic area is hearing all that radio traffic, and if there's an immediate need, can start to work to solve the problem. And even if there's not an immediate need on the radio, that tactical boss can coordinate those efforts in those companies at that entry point to be ready to deploy as quickly as possible. The tactical boss also has an opportunity to look at their tactical accountability piece and see, who do I have working inside in the area of where that company is now? So the strategic IC is starting with that help order, talking to that company or the person that's having the Mayday. And then once they get through step one of the help order, really, which is, talking to the company, calm down, where are you at? What are you doing? How much air do you have? What do you need? Which is all the information coming out that helps the tactical boss figure out, how am I going to solve this problem? Tactical boss can be thinking about, okay, well, engine 5 is inside of there, and engine 2 is not going to solve this on their own, though we're starting to solve it. And the tactical boss, once the Mayday is pushed down to them from command, so command Alpha, you got the Mayday, are you clear on the needs? Alpha's got it. I'm clear on the needs. They can start to deploy companies as needed. And when I say deploy, I'm not necessarily talking about sending an on-deck, first and foremost, RIT team from outside. I'm talking about engine 5's inside. Let's call them. It was Firefighter Smith, got lost off the hand line. The strategic IC said, Firefighter Smith, activate your pass device. The company that Firefighter Smith is with is already looking for him and kind of got some direction from the strategic IC, hopefully. And then the tactical boss can take that approach of using the companies that he had working inside that space to work to solve the problem. So Alpha to engine 5. Firefighter Smith has activated their pass device. We want you to listen for the pass device. And then, during all of this, verifying that we have what's the status of the fire, right? So in most cases, the tactical boss has got a pretty good idea on that, really almost second to second, like what's going on with the fire. We know if it's getting better or worse because we're a little bit closer to the problem where we can, feel it, smell it, taste it, touch it. And it's like we got a pretty good feeling of what's going on with it. So that's how that tactical boss really, starts to help and engages, because the strategic IC still has a list of things, and that's not what we're talking about today, but the strategic IC still has a list of things that they're looking at, making sure we got enough resources. Do we have enough ambulances en route to this? What if this turns into we have 2 or 3 people that become part of this Mayday and we're transporting multiple people? Are we still in the correct strategy? Because sometimes, when you are a little bit closer, you can lose the focus of the 30,000 feet, but the tactical boss's job isn't the strategic boss's job. That kind of falls back to the strategic boss's job is, are we in the correct strategy? And like seeing that bigger picture. So again, I talk so much about, lining this all up with sports. There's a reason why there's a head coach and an offensive line coach and a defensive line coach and a special teams coordinator and an assistant to an assistant to an assistant coach in every one of those levels. And, sometimes specific people that only talk to certain people on the team when we're going to have them do something for the super secret handshake play to pull off and win the championship, whatever it is. And on the fire ground, I think we could do a better job of kind of trying to look at that and mimic that. But we have accidental success so often, and we just think that it works, that we're not ready oftentimes when it doesn't work.
Well, and I think too that we talk about we prepare for the next transmission to be Mayday, 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 and the way it was put to me when we started talking about this was that this is making that critical factor on the fire ground, that Mayday that just occurred, just another tactic that Division 3, if we go back to our apartment fire, Mayday occurs on Division 3, Floor 3, Division 3 is in place. That's just one more thing for that boss to take care of. And they've got the resources inside to do it. They've got the resources on deck to do it. They've checked to make sure we have airfill, transfill available for them immediately. They're in a much better spot than the way we used to do it, where I'm just going to assign a rat chief to take care of that, a RIT chief or RIC chief, whatever you want to call it. We're just going to assign that other chief to do that for us when this thing happens. And he's mysteriously going to run from the back of my car, and he's going to be on that 3rd floor immediately in that situation and trying to figure out what's going on when the tactical boss was already in place, and who better to handle that with his embedded safety officer.
We're with a bunch of officers this week in Maine, at Westbrook, Maine. They're doing their first blue card certification lab. One of the wise guys, he's an officer, been an officer for a while, in the back of the room, he and I were talking on a break, and he said, back in the day when we had rapid intervention teams, we did a lot of dangerous stuff because we figured, the rapid intervention team is going to come in and save me. And it almost was a pass for the interior crews to do a lot of things they normally wouldn't do. And we're kind of getting a little off topic right now, but I think it's important to acknowledge that. And part of that is having that good supervision on that divisional level, because when you have a division boss, not only you're going to cut down communication, you're going to go from the inside out when they're running that Mayday, they're also going to be entry control and not allow a lot of freelancing and crazy things to happen, which has been known to happen when the Mayday is transmitted.
How do you have a better level of accountability than someone right there watching what's going to happen? You're reducing radio traffic. You're not listening to engine 1's moving to the 2nd floor, engine 1's moving to the 3rd floor, engine 1's moving to the basement. There is someone right there tracking that information. Now it doesn't have to go across the radio. We're leaving the radio frequency open for the critical factors, the priority traffic, God forbid, the Mayday, Mayday, Mayday when it hits. So I think it just improves all aspects of our fire scene.
So November 3rd and 4th at the Alan V. Brunacini Command Training Center in Phoenix, which, if you haven't gotten there, it's a beautiful facility. It's a great place to go to a class. There's a lot of good networking. You won't go hungry when you're there. But more importantly, the learning that goes on in that building is just fantastic. It's stuff that Chief Brunacini would be very proud of. So we're doing this division operations workshop in November. What is going to be in that workshop, and all these things that we just talked about, which just scratches the surface of being a good division boss and preparing a division boss. How is that going to be addressed at that workshop?
Yeah, so the workshop's going to start, it's 2 days, It'll be 2 very full days. It's going to start out with, like a lot of stuff we do, the crawl, walk, run. We're not going to throw anybody in the middle of anything. It's a teaching opportunity. And it's going to be about how do we expand and support, the incident commander. And when we really think about it, the mobile IC, when they get there, the mobile IC is task, tactical, and strategic level incident commander. Whether you like it or not, thinking about it that way, the mobile IC's got all of it. They are the IC. They're in charge of it. So, that one's pretty easy. We've been doing it forever. We do the command transfer. The battalion gets there. They end up in their car in a strategic position, verify position, function of units, all those things. So we're going to hit that. We're going to talk about that growing piece, and it's not going to be a ton of it, but we're going to hit that on the front end. And then from there, we're going to start talking about tactical bosses at multiple different building types with multiple different critical factors. And like everything we do with Blue Card, we assign companies and resources to solve and work through the critical factors addressing our objectives. So we only push tactical bosses into place, one, if it's going to enhance the incident command system, reduce the span of control, and if it's going to make it better. There's no reason to push a tactical boss forward when they key up and there's 2 companies working and they just set a fan at the front door. We had some cabinets on fire. We're wrapping up. I mean, that's not the case, but you got a couple of rooms burning. It's into the wall. It's a balloon frame house. It's running up the wall. We're going to push somebody maybe into Alpha because we're going to end up with multiple companies on several floors, working, and they're connected to it a little bit closer. We're going to talk about all of the job description and what the SOP looks like for tactical bosses. And every organization is going to have to, make an adjustment to it for what do you expect your people to do as tactical bosses at certain building types. We're going to spend some time talking about what that looks like, expanding much more than what we do in the basic Blue Card certification piece when it comes to the job description of the tactical boss and the support officer embedded safety. Every one of those bullet points that we have in the system, there's probably 5 or 6 or 7 more bullet points off of every single one of those. That's a subtitle of, well, what does it mean that we're in the correct strategy? Well, it goes back to the strategic decision-making model. So, under that alone, you're walking through it as a tactical boss, going through the strategic decision-making model. Are we really doing what we're supposed to be doing? We're going to talk about the whole accountability piece, embedded safety, air management, entry control. We'll talk a bit about how it actually lets us be a bit more intelligently aggressive on the fire ground because we got somebody else in position that's managing it. So the strategic IC feels a little bit more comfortable about the event. So day 1, we're going to spend some time talking about SOPs and exercise the system a little bit. And on day 2, it will be mostly a full day of simulations on 5 different building types. So what does it look like when you push somebody forward as Alpha on 2 single-family homes on fire? Where do you put them? What does that sound like? We're going to talk a bit about how do you transfer that to them? So we talk about the transfer of command from the mobile IC to the strategic IC, and we don't do a really good job talking much about when you push a tactical boss forward, what does that really sound like, and how do you verify that they know who's working for them and what really their task location and objective is. So we'll spend some time talking about that and talking about how does that sound, and then give people the opportunity to exercise that. So people start to get a little bit more comfortable with, okay, Alpha's there. I'm the strategic IC. I can't just say you got Alpha and not talk to them again. I have to give them, I'm going to give you Alpha. Let me know when you're in place. Okay, Alpha, I'm in place now. Okay, you got engine 7, 9, and 11, and your objective is fire control and search. Let me know what else you need. And that does a few things. One, the company's here a couple different times that now Alpha's in place so that they're not calling command, because we hear that oftentimes. And then we're being specific enough with the task location objective that the tactical boss hopefully has in their mindset that, okay, you're not the strategic IC and you're not the task level person. You are responsible for this specific assignment that I gave you, no different than when I give a company an assignment. If I say engine 7, stretch a line to the 2nd floor, primary search fire control, I only want to hear back from them really when they can't do it or when they've completed it. Same thing. I put a tactical boss forward. I gave them a task location objective, said what their resources are to work through that, and call me if you can't do it, if you need help, or when you finished it. So we're looking forward to it. I think it's exciting. And this is actually going to be a whole nother piece that's going to probably be in the 8th revision of Blue Card, because we've identified that we can all do a better job putting tactical level command transfer, if you will, into place and back into the basic program and spend a little bit more time on that.
So if you're interested in going to this workshop, you can go to bshifter.com, go to the events heading, click on that. You can register online, or you can register by calling the office. This is the only one at the AVBCTC in the next several months, or maybe even next 6 months. So it's a limited opportunity right now, and hopefully you can get out there and get on it and fill in the gaps for your division operations. Thanks for joining us on this B Shifter. We appreciate you listening. If you enjoyed the episode or you were mildly amused by it, please subscribe. Please tell a friend. It's how we grow this podcast. If, again, you are interested in any of our workshops, you can go to bshifter.com. Click on events. We have all that information there. We'd like to thank Doug Wehmeyer, who was our special guest today. His information, he's a very accomplished chief, is in the show notes, so you can find out a little more about Doug. Until next time, thanks so much for listening to B Shifter.